The next thing that happens is that when we go to obey God, prayer affirms it. See, Peter's not the only one praying in this time. Cornelius, an unclean and common Gentile, has been praying. And he has sent word to the house of Peter to, oops, close. I know, she got you. That's my phone. Cornelius and Peter have been praying at the same time and didn't even realize that their prayers were actually uniting them. This is an awesome and wonderful thing that happens in the church many, many times. Or as a recent email sent to me by Phil said, it seems as though we're playing the same symphony under a divine conductor. Because the first time we spoke about something, we were already right there because we'd both been praying about it. This is a really cool thing to see happen in our lives. Prayer affirms obedience. So Peter goes to Cornelius' house, and in fact he brings a few of his fellow believers with him, and you know the other Reformed Jews with Peter are in this house, and Peter goes ahead and goes in, and so because Peter went in, they're like, I guess we're supposed to go in too. They haven't been going through this vision process. They're not quite up to speed with where Peter is yet. And they go in, and the Spirit of the Lord comes upon these unclean common folk. Because see, the third part of how we know that we're obeying God is that God produces the results of what He said would happen when we obey Him. First, Scripture confirms it. Second, prayer affirms it. And third, God produces it. Now there's an amazing thing that is happening here. Obedience in God requires faith. And faith means that we trust God. It means that we actually believe God. And this has come up many times over. We're not just called to believe in God. We see in James where he talks about the demons that know for a fact that God is real, and they shudder. Believing in God wins you no prize. Believing God at His word and acting upon it is where we find our salvation. From the very beginning, when He says, believe in me to cleanse you, all the way to the end. So faith is the active trust of God. It doesn't get easier. Or as I told Joseph Friday evening when we kind of met, just the two of us for merge because other people were at work and whatnot. Anyone that tells you that being a Christian gets easier is selling you something that isn't Christianity. And a case in point for that, there are 12 chosen. One dies in the field because he gives up on that calling. Of those remaining, 10 are martyred and one dies in a rock prison island called Patmos. At what point do you think faith got easier for them? That it got real simple and real comfortable? If it leads to your death. If that's what you're willing to take. It remains simple. Obey me. Follow me. That's the simplicity of the call. Doesn't get easier. God builds up our faith so that the next time when He calls us to something even greater, we once again will obey. In fact, one thing that I've seen a few times with those who have been leaders in my life is the hardship that they went through, because the harder part in faith was that physically their body would not allow them to be in a pulpit Sunday after Sunday and doing all the things that they thought they would just do until the time that they died. And eventually they have to succumb to the fact that obedience to God even includes retirement. And of course they never give, it just, you can't retire a pastor. But you know, they're not in a full-time capacity, and the struggle then is to believe that there's still this great purpose and still something that they're obeying God and doing. And so I've had these leaders talk to me about how God has called them so much more to a prayer ministry at this point in their life than they'd ever been aware of before. You know, men that we always had honored and respected and loved because we knew they were praying, God-fearing men. And yet God called them to such an extreme in that prayer and seeking Him and interceding for others, which I do believe we'll hear some good word on next week, that they still find it stretching their faith as they seek to obey God and have Him produce results. Now, to fully understand this digging deep imagery, we have to understand that there's a reason why Christ wouldn't use just one metaphor for what something was like and leave it at that. In fact, you know, Phil mentioned earlier that, you know, quite often Christ spoke about the kingdom. If you really pay attention, Christ will speak about the kingdom in rapid-fire succession using different imagery time and time again, because He knows that each metaphor is limited, but He hopes that if you can just grasp what's kind of working as the thread throughout it all, that you'll begin to see the goodness of the kingdom. Because it's so big that we can't just use one metaphor. And so to understand this passage, the first thing that we have to do is jump back to what we were talking about last week with a tree that can only produce one thing. And from the root to the branch, this tree can only produce one thing. You don't get figs from briars. And so, you know, once again, we have to kind of dig deep, because it would be real easy to say, all right, you know, I dug deep, I laid the foundation on the rock, and now my house is built and will not shake. Yeah. So then we have to understand it's also this living thing. We have to kind of get into that tree mentality as well. See, you don't have to spend much time around me to understand that while my house is just kind of brick and plaster and wood, my household is definitely a living, moving thing. It's a growing, active thing, and it's alive with energy that we need to transfer to mommy and daddy. But it's alive and it's vibrant. And so it requires an active faith for it to continue to remain on that rock.